At its core, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker is a classic Zelda game. It has bad guys, it has dungeons, and it has items in those dungeons. But there is one thing that separates it from the rest of the games in the series. A mechanic so important that it's actually in the title of the game. Link's ability to control the wind. With this ability, Link is able to sail the Great Sea, find the 8 Triforce Shards, and defeat the evil Ganondorf. But what if we took that away? What if we took away Link's ability to control the wind? What if we turned the Wind Waker into just the Waker? What would it do to the game? Obviously, it would affect sailing, but there's a lot of other things in the game that use the wind as well, like items, environmental set pieces, hell, there's even a temple that revolves around it. So, given these limitations, would it even be possible to beat the game like this? We know what the Hero of the Winds can do, but can it be done by just a regular guy in a boat? Well, that's the question, isn't it? And it's a question we're gonna answer today, as I try to beat The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker without the wind. Before we get started, guys, just a reminder to sub to the channel if you like what we do here. I know it's something small and stupid, but it really does help us out. Thanks. Okay, so before we get into the challenge, let me first break down the rules so we're all on the same page. Basically, there's only one rule. I can't use any kind of wind to help us beat the game in any kind of way. I can't change its direction, I can't use it to warp, I can't use it with items, and I can't take advantage of it in the environment. That's pretty much it. I can't use the wind in any way that'll positively affect this run. It's really that simple. So, without further ado, let's get into it. We start off the run by sitting through Wind Waker's long-ass intro cutscene. Then we grab the tunic from Grandma, nab the telescope from our sister Errol, and get our sword from this old man. We then use said sword to save Tetra, a pirate who just happens to lead this giant bird to Link's home of Outset Island. This giant bird kidnaps our sister Errol, and we break our poor old grandmother's heart and head off to the Forsaken Fortress with the pirates to find her. Once we're there, we sneakily make our way past the guards and have our face-off with the giant bird, which we promptly lose and get thrown out to sea, where we happen to come across the King of Red Lions, a talking boat who will help us sail across the Great Sea and rescue our sister. But like any good boat, he needs a sail to function, so he asks us to go into town and find him a sail. While I was doing that, I thought to myself, wow, this is going really well. At this point, we had basically completed the tutorial, and I hadn't hit a single issue yet. And if you know anything about challenge runs, the tutorial is usually the hardest part. But yeah, all we needed was this silly sail, and we could head out into the open ocean and start our adventure. So, yeah, it turns out you actually need the wind to operate a sail. Who knew? Yeah, so the sail we bought is completely useless to us. If this was a motorboat, we would be completely fine, but unfortunately, the only way this boat moves is through wind power. Well, that's not completely true. If you look in the top right corner, you can see a button here that says cruise. If we press it, the boat will move forward at a snail's pace. And I mean it. Like, look at this. This is not how you're supposed to sail the open seas. This button is mainly used for precise movements like docking or moving through tight corridors. It is not meant for sailing the open seas, but unfortunately for us, it's the only option we have, so it'll have to do. Even though Dragon Roost Island is only 2 squares away from Windfall, it still takes us 5 whole minutes to get there using cruise. Which may not seem like a lot, but if we were using the sail, it would probably only take us like 30 seconds to a minute to make it here. Doing some simple math, we can estimate that it takes 2.5 minutes to make it through 1 square on the map. Since Wind Waker's map is a 7x7 grid, it would mean it would take us 17.5 minutes to make it from one side of the map to the other. Which is really depressing, but it's a problem we can deal with later, because right now we're on Dragon Roost Island and we have to help the Rito tribe deal with a little dragon problem. Valoo, the dragon of Dragon Roost Island, is having some issues, and we need to bring Medley, the only person who understands his ancient language, to him to find out what they are. Getting Medley to Valoo, though, is a problem. To make our way all the way up the mountain, we have to first make it to Dragon Roost Cavern. To do that, we need to throw Medley up on this ledge, but to do that, we need to use the wind. The only way to get her up here is to time your throw at the exact moment the wind starts blowing forward. Without the extra boost from the wind, Medley just can't reach the high ledge. No matter what angle you throw her at or where you throw her from, it just doesn't matter. Without the wind, she can't get up there. So, is that it? Is the run already over? Well, not exactly. You see, the only reason we need to throw Medley up on this ledge is so she can give us the bottle. Once we have the bottle, we can water these bomb flowers and then blow up this rock, which will fill up this whole area with water, allowing us to swim across. So, we don't really need to help Medley out. We just have to find a bottle. And luckily for us, there is another way to get one. There's a submarine sitting off the shore of Bomb Island. If you go to that submarine and kill the enemies inside, you'll be rewarded with a bottle. We could then use that bottle back on Dragon Roost Island to fill up that area with water and get ourselves to that ledge. All without having to throw Medley or use the wind. Problem is, you can't leave Dragon Roost Island until you defeat the boss of Dragon Roost Cavern. You literally can't even enter the boat. The game just won't let you. So our only option is to start the game over and try again. Which is what I do. I start a new file, go through all the tutorial bullshit again, finish off the Forsaken Fortress, and then once I'm ready to leave Windfall, instead of going to Dragon Roost Island, I head south to Bomb Island. Okay, turns out you can't do that either. If you head in any direction that isn't Dragon Roost Island, the King of Red Lions will say you can't go there and just turn himself around. If we can't use the King of Red Lions, it means we only have one other option to do this. And it's an option I really didn't want to do, because it's considered to be the hardest trick in the Wind Waker, and it's really not even close. This trick is called manual super swimming. I'll try my best to explain why it's so hard, but I'm not an expert on this, so some of the info here might not be 100% correct. Basically, when Link enters the water and swims forward, his speed increases until he hits a certain speed cap. When Link turns around in the water, his speed will decrease by a certain amount. But the thing is, unlike his forward speed, this backward speed has no cap on it. So, if you could turn Link around fast enough, you could build up an enormous amount of negative speed. You can build up so much speed that you can do things like this. The problem is, turning Link around fast enough is really difficult. Like, almost impossibly difficult. You have to change the direction of the analog stick on every frame. And since the Wind Waker HD runs at 30 frames a second, it would mean you would have to change the direction 30 times in 1 second. Which is basically impossible, and is why most people who speedrun this game use a method called pause buffering. Basically, to ensure they change the direction of the stick on every frame, they pause the game, put the stick in one direction, unpause it, let the game advance by a single frame, then pause it again and change the direction of the stick. This is what is known as a frame perfect input. An input that has to be done on a specific frame. What makes this trick so notorious though, is that you have to do multiple frame perfect inputs. And not like 2 or 5 or even 10, you have to do hundreds of frame perfect inputs to build up the speed you need to super swim. I went on the Wind Waker speedrunning Discord and asked how long it would take me, a complete Wind Waker noob, to learn how to manually super swim. And they said many, many hours. Now, I'm down to spend multiple hours on a trick. I've done it before and I'll continue doing it for this channel, but they made it seem like it would take multiple weeks to learn this, not multiple hours. If I want to get these videos out to you guys in a timely manner, I can't spend multiple weeks learning a single trick, especially since that trick will become obsolete like 30 minutes after doing it. I'll explain that part later. But yeah, I did end up trying it for a bit and got absolutely nowhere. So instead of me doing it myself, let me explain how I would do it if I had the powers of a Wind Waker speedrunning god. Basically, you can do it in one of two ways. You can start the game off, super swim from Outset Island to the submarine, grab the bottle, and then super swim to Dragon Roost Island from there, or you can make it all the way to Dragon Roost Island normally, then super swim from Dragon Roost to the submarine, grab the bottle, then take it back to Dragon Roost Island. You may be wondering how the boat got to the submarine since we super swam there, and that's because the King of Red Lions will spawn near you if you enter a loading zone on an island. So since we hit the loading zone of the submarine, he'll just be there when we come out. But yeah, now we have the bottle, so we can just go back to Dragon Roost Island, water those bomb flowers, and blow up the rock, all without Melody's help. And more importantly, without having to use the wind. And listen, I know it's a little lame that I didn't do it myself, but I promise you, this is the last time it'll happen in this run. So now that little section with Melody is dealt with, we can blast through Dragon Roost Island and defeat the game's first boss, because there's no wind in this dungeon whatsoever. It's actually pretty uneventful. The only thing worth mentioning is that we nabbed ourselves the grappling hook, which allows us to do some pretty funky shit. But I'll get back to that in 1 second, because right now we have to learn the Wind's Requiem if we want to leave Dragon Roost. It's literally the same situation as before, where we can't even get in the boat unless we do this specific thing. If you didn't know, the Wind's Requiem is what allows Link to change the direction of the wind. And since this is a no-wind challenge, we obviously can't do that. But there is one thing we can do. We can do another super swim. And I know you're probably thinking, hey, didn't you just do a 5-minute rant complaining about how hard super swims are? And didn't you just promise us that every trick from here on out you would do yourself? Well, dear viewer, the answer to both those questions is yes. Because this isn't a manual super swim. This is an item slide super swim. Remember that grappling hook I mentioned a little while back? Well, this thing allows us to do the most broken trick in the game. And that trick is called item sliding. Item sliding works in a similar way to manual super swimming, in that both tricks take advantage of the fact that Wind Waker HD has no negative speed cap. For some reason, if you pull out a first-person item like the grappling hook, and you just hold up on the joystick, pause the game, and change the direction of the joystick to slightly down, you will build up a tremendous amount of negative speed. And I'm not exaggerating. Using this method, Link will multiply his speed by 1.2 every single frame. And since the Wind Waker runs at 30 frames a second, that's a lot of speed really quickly. In fact, you can build up so much speed like this that you can just crash the game, because the game literally runs into digits to calculate Link's speed. Thankfully though, there is a way to stop Link's speed from building up. If we press the target button, it'll stop Link from building speed, and will actually start to slowly decrease it. The problem is, when you press the target button, Link will go flying off to the left. This is because when Link is using the grapple, and the target button is pressed, he will move slightly to the left. But since we have so much speed built up, this slight movement to the left gets exaggerated tenfold, and we go flying off into the horizon. So to make sure this doesn't happen, we need to have a solid object on our left-hand side that'll stop us in our tracks when we go flying off. Also, if we want to perform a super swim, this solid object has to be sloping into the water. If it's not, and we enter the water off a ledge for example, all that speed that Link built up will stop immediately. Luckily, there's a spot on Dragon Roost Island that meets all of our needs. This little wall here that slopes into the water creates perfect conditions for a super swim. All we need to do is position ourselves so the wall is on our left-hand side, hold left on the joystick, pause the game, then hold slightly right on the joystick. This will cause us to build up a ton of speed against the wall. We can then press the target button, and since the wall is on our left, we won't go anywhere. Then we can slowly maneuver Link into the water, and boom, we're super swimming. Yeah, so turns out super swimming itself is pretty hard. Since Link is going backwards, the controls are reversed, which wouldn't be so bad if we were going at a reasonable speed, but look at how fast we're going. It is so hard to tell where you are or where you're going because you're moving so fast. I actually had to use the map on the Wii U gamepad just to tell where I was half the time. There's also something called splooshing, which occurs when you come across an island with a lot of particles. Since the island has so many particles, it causes the game to have to reload the ocean, which in turn makes Link fall for a single frame, killing all of our speed instantly. So yeah, super swimming is like navigating a minefield while moving at 100 miles an hour. It's ass. But after like 40 attempts and absolutely spamming the start button so I could slow things down and actually see where I was going, I was able to super swim all the way from Dragon Roost Island to Forest Haven, which took me a total of like 5 seconds. Look at this. Super swimming is incredibly powerful. It's just hard to do. So as soon as we hit the loading zone for the Forest Haven, the King of Red Lions is just kinda there. We swim to his boat and the cutscene for the Forest Haven just starts to play like we made it there normally. Which means we have successfully skipped learning the Wind's Requiem. Which, if you had forgotten, is why we did all this in the first place. So the Forest Haven and its dungeon, the Forbidden Woods, are really quite a bitch. And it's mostly because they're designed around this item, the Deku Leaf. If you didn't know, the Deku Leaf has 2 abilities. It can allow Link to hover in midair and can be used to blow objects on the ground like wind turbines are nuts. I would say for sure blowing objects is definitely using the wind, but I wasn't so sure on the hovering part. Hovering like this does use the air, but I don't think it uses the wind. They are very similar things, but at the same time, they are different. So I basically came to the conclusion that using the Deku Leaf to hover was fine, as long as I didn't use the wind to gain any type of advantage. So I can hover with the leaf, I just can't blow objects with it or use the wind while hovering. Unfortunately for us though, to make it through the dungeon in this area, we have to use the wind to get across this massive gap. Normally, you're supposed to use the Deku Leaf and jump into this tornado, which gives you enough height to reach the small island. You then wait for the tornado to come around and jump in it again, which will give you enough height to reach the dungeon. But this was the exact type of scenario I was talking about. We cannot use the tornado to give us any type of advantage because that would be using the wind. So what do we do now? How do we get across this gigantic gap without using this tornado? Well, believe it or not, we can just use item sliding again. If we cut down the 2 bushes by this wall, point ourselves at the Forbidden Woods, and perform an item slide backwards, we can build up a ton of speed against the wall. And this time, we don't actually need anything to our left because we're not going to be hitting the target button at all. We're actually going to be hitting the B button because the B button causes Link to jump slash. And jump slashing does something very good for us. If we have a lot of speed built up and we jump slash, it'll shoot Link forward so fast that it looks like he just teleported. So using this jump slash method, we can build up speed against this wall, aim at the Forbidden Woods, press B, and then shoot across the gap, allowing us to get to the Forbidden Woods without having to use the wind. But don't get comfortable because we have to use the wind in this dungeon a lot. Like literally in the 3rd room, we're supposed to use the Deku Leaf to blow this windmill to bring across the gondola. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, this is easy. You can just item slide to jump across the gap like you did before. Which is kind of true, but the problem is, item sliding can gain massive amounts of horizontal distance, but it gains very little vertical distance. Going back to the gap we jumped before, we can see that the ledge we started on is quite a bit higher than the one we ended up on. But this new ledge we have to jump to is actually higher. And no matter how many times I try to item slide across it, I would always come up short. After trying for a while, I went back to the Wind Waker speedrunning Discord to see if there was any way this was possible. And, it turns out I just had to hold up. The only way Link will grab onto a ledge in this game is if you're holding up on the joystick. So every time I was doing the item slide across the gap, I was hitting the ledge, I just wasn't holding up to grab onto it. So literally, just by holding up, we can do the item slide, grab onto the ledge, and skip having to use the wind, no problem. So after that, I completed one more room, then came across another roadblock. In this room, there's a nut surrounded by these thorny tentacle things. And to progress through the room, you need to use a deco leaf to blow the nut out of the circle without triggering the tentacles to pop up. At that point, you can use the nut to break the flower on the door and leave the room. Unfortunately, there's no way to access this nut without the deco leaf. Unfortunately for us, the tentacles create an impenetrable force field, and no matter what, you just can't reach it. But guess what? We don't have to reach it, because we have our good friend, Item Slide, to help us out once again. If we perform an item slide into the door, we can build up a bunch of speed and use a jump slash, which will teleport us across the room, allowing us to kill the flower before it closes. Honestly, I made it sound way easier than it actually is. Most of the time, I would end up missing, being too slow, or getting trapped in the Ring of Thorns with no way out. Meaning, I would have to kill myself and start the dungeon over from the start again. But either way, I made it through, finished off a couple more rooms, and then made it to the mini-boss, who we actually beat no problem. Which honestly kind of surprised me, because I thought you needed the deco leaf to kill him, but you can totally just jump slash him and it works perfectly fine. For actually defeating the mini-boss, we get the boomerang, which allows us to cut down vines, which we actually have to do here to access the bottom floor of the dungeon. So after it's cut down, we drop down ourselves and come across this fucking abomination of a room. What you're supposed to do in this room is cut down this flower from the ceiling and then use the deco leaf to blow yourself down the river so you can jump off onto this ledge. But we of course can't do that, so we have to item slide again. And let me tell you, this item slide is a real bitch. We have to basically item slide against the wall behind us, jump slash forward, then pull out the deco leaf and float to the ledge. Doing this, however, is way easier said than done. Even making it to the opposite wall with a jump slash wasn't easy. Most of the time, I would just do this. Even if I did make it, I would usually be so surprised and forget to hit the button to pull out the deco leaf. Or I would pull it out and just not have enough height to make it there. Or one of these lovely gentlemen would knock me out of midair. I tried this over and over and over again, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get enough height to make it to the ledge. And I didn't know it at the time, but this was because I was missing one very important piece to the puzzle. To actually make it from the wall to the ledge, you need to do something called leaf pumping. To perform a leaf pump, we need to first be floating with the deco leaf. Then press A to put the leaf away, and immediately after, press the button to bring the leaf back out again. If done right, it allows Link to cover much greater distances with the deco leaf without losing altitude. Which at that point was something I desperately needed because I never had enough height to make it to the ledge. So after like an hour of trying, I was finally able to merge these two mechanics together using both the item slide and leaf pump to make it to the ledge. After that, the rest of the dungeon was easy. I was able to obtain the boss key on my way back to the upper floors, and instead of using this fan, which the game intends you to do, I just saved and quit, which teleported me back to the start of the dungeon. Which at that point, I used the warp pot to get back to the boss room and defeat the boss. All without using the wind. So now that the Forbidden Woods is dealt with, there is a pretty big section of the game that basically doesn't deal with any wind at all. So I'll be skipping over most of it. Basically, all we do is head to Greatfish Isle, find out Ganon has killed everyone there, then go to Windfall, get bombs from the pirates, head back to Outset Island, get the third pearl, place all the pearls on their respective islands, complete the Tower of the Gods, head down to Hyrule to nab the Master Sword, and then sail all the way to the Forsaken Fortress and kill the Helmarok King to save our little sister. All of this can be done very easily without using the wind. There was a lot of sailing, or cruising I should say, which took forever and really sucked, but that was basically it. So here's the thing. After you complete the Forsaken Fortress a second time, the game kind of goes in a weird direction. You are given the task by the King of Red Lions to return the Master Sword to its former glory. To do this, we need to beat the Earth Temple and the Wind Temple. But we can't enter the Earth or Wind Temple without two very important items: the Power Bracelet and the Iron Boots. You get these two items by completing a timed trial on Fire Mountain and Ice Ring Isle. But to access Fire Mountain and Ice Ring Isle, you need the Fire and Ice Arrows. You need the Ice Arrows to put out the blaze on Fire Mountain, and you need the Fire Arrows to melt the ice on Ice Ring Isle. The only problem is that getting the Fire and Ice Arrows is impossible for us. To get them, you need to use the Ballad of the Gales, a song that allows you to warp around the map at will. To get the Fire and Ice Arrows, you need to warp to Mother and Child Island and talk to the Great Fairy there. This is the only way you can access the Great Fairy, as there is no other way in or out of the island, except for using the Ballad of the Gales. And we can't use the Ballad of the Gales because we can't use the wind. Not being able to use the song was something that didn't even occur to me when I was brainstorming this challenge. But, look at this. This is obviously using the wind. We can't use this song. So, what are we gonna do? The challenge is basically over. We can't get to the Great Fairy. Well, that's not exactly true. While it is true we can't get to the Great Fairy, it's not true that the challenge is over. Because we do have a way around this, but it's so terrible that I wish we didn't. Let me try to explain. So after we beat the Forsaken Fortress, and before we do any of the stuff I just mentioned, we have to go back down to Hyrule. And Hyrule is weird, mainly because it contains the end of the game, Ganon's Tower. If you go outside the castle, you can literally see it off in the distance. The only problem is, there's a massive barrier blocking you from getting to it. You're supposed to break down this barrier at the end of the game when you have the powered up Master Sword and all the Triforce pieces. Which is unfortunate for us because we need to get to Ganon's Tower now, because waiting inside of Ganon's Tower are the light arrows. The most powerful arrow type in the game. Do you want to know what happens when you obtain the light arrows without having any other arrow type? You just get them. If we get the light arrows, the game will just assume that if we got to this point, we must have the Fire and Ice Arrows already. So it just gives them to us. Which means we now have a way to obtain Fire and Ice Arrows. The only problem is, we still have the barrier to deal with. And if you followed the speedrunning scene for this game even a little bit, you probably know exactly what we're about to do. We have to perform Barrier Skip. Maybe one of the most famous skips in all of speedrunning, and one that was thought to be impossible for many years. I'll be honest with you guys, the thought of doing this skip scared the shit out of me, because it's so infamous. The thought of performing one of Wind Waker's biggest skips while being a complete Wind Waker noob seemed like such a daunting task. It's also not that it's just super famous, it's also just really hard, or at least it used to be. Since Barrier Skip was founded, there have been a number of improvements to make it faster and easier. The keyword here is easier, because it's still not easy. It's just not as hard as it used to be, because let me tell you, it's a pain in the ass. The barrier is actually made up of two separate walls. One is the force field that you can see that knocks Link back when he walks into it, and the other is an invisible wall behind the force field that Link cannot pass through. So the first thing we need to do is get past the force field portion of the wall. You do this by first walking into the force field, which will knock Link backwards. Then, while you're still immune to damage, you need to walk back into the force field so that you're basically standing inside of it. Now that you're in the force field, you have to pull out the Wind Waker on the last frame of Link's damage immunity, which means it's a frame perfect trick. Yay! Now that we're past the force field section, we need to find the correct angle. For reasons I don't really understand, you need a specific angle to pass through the wall. Out of 65,000 angles, apparently only 16 of them work. To find one of these 16 angles, we have to first look at this wall on the right and then press target, which will snap us to a specific position. Mind you, this only works when Link is in this weird state of clipping through the first barrier. Next, we need to pull out our shield, pause the game, hold left, unpause it, and then pause it again in a single frame. This is because Link moves a set distance while using his shield in one frame. So combining the angle we first had when we snapped to the wall, and adding the amount we just moved while using the shield, gives us a usable barrier skip angle. Now we want to go into first person with the grappling hook, which thankfully doesn't change our angle at all. Then item slide to the right. Once we're hitting the wall, we want to hit target, which will bring us out of first person. We then want to tap the shield button, which will cause Link to stop the animation where he's swinging the grapple and just walk forward. Now we want to hit target again, walk to the left side of the barrier, tap shield again to do the same thing, and then just sit back and watch while the magic unfolds. So, this seems kind of complicated, right? Lots of steps, very precise angles, 2 frame perfect inputs. It's kind of a lot. What if I told you I got it on my 3rd try? Yeah, turns out your boy isn't just good at Pikmin, I guess it's just all Nintendo games. I'm basically a Wind Waker prodigy. Doing barrier skip on your 3rd try? That's insane. That's crazy. Wait, what the fuck? Yeah, so turns out we're not quite done yet. To actually enter Ganon's tower, we're supposed to use the hookshot to bypass these 2 gaps here. But we don't have the hookshot. You get that in the Wind Temple, which we haven't been to yet. So we're gonna have to item slide across those 2 pits. Which is scary because I might fuck it up and we might fall in. And I don't want to know what happens when you fall into those pits. So let's not fuck this up. No, what? Oh my god! Yeah, if you fall down one of those pits, you get brought back to the last door you came from, which is the door to Hyrule Castle, which is on the wrong side of the fucking barrier. But this shouldn't be a problem, right? I did barrier skip on my 3rd try after all. I'm the Zelda prodigy, remember? I can do this. Yeah, turns out I couldn't do this. I don't know what happened on that 3rd try, but I must have got super lucky. I tried doing this for an hour and I just couldn't get it. I would get Link to the point where he had to walk through the middle of the wall, but he would just never get through. He would just endlessly run at it. Not going through, not going anywhere. So after trying for a bit more, I decided to call upon the Elder Sages of the Wind Waker speedrunning Discord, so that they could once again bestow their wisdom upon me. And it turns out, I was just building up too much speed. Yeah, you know the part where you're supposed to item slide against the wall? It turns out, I was just doing that for too long. Just like with the angle, barrier skip needs a specific speed to work as well. While it's nowhere near as specific as the angle, it still can't be above a certain point. And I was just way above that point. So I tried it again with a lower speed and it worked. I was now past the barrier for a 2nd time. And that's great and all, but we still have the problem of getting across those 2 gaps right before Ganon's tower. Thankfully, the Zelda sages had some advice for me on that as well. Apparently, you don't need to item slide. You can just use a Deku Leaf to hop across. So, yeah, let's just do that. We had finally made it to Ganon's Tower. After 2 barrier skips and a whole bunch of other bullshit, we had finally made it. Which means it's all good now. The hard part is over. Barrier skip is behind us. All we have to do now is get the light arrows and get the hell out of here. Oh no. No, 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 no! So, if you didn't know, Ganon's Tower is basically a boss rush. Which by itself isn't a problem, but it is when you're not supposed to be here. We haven't gone to the Earth or Wind Temple yet, so we don't have the items needed to beat the bosses in those temples. You need the power bracelets and Mirror Shield to beat the boss of the Earth Temple. And you need the hookshot to beat the boss of the Wind Temple. But we need the fire and ice arrows to get those items. But we also need those items to get the fire and ice arrows. So, we're kind of fucked. Or, at least we would be, if there wasn't something called Trial Skip. To perform Trial Skip, we need to first item slide across the room onto this door frame. Then item slide again from the door frame to this tusk. Once we're on the tusk, we want to roll forward to grab onto the skull and make our way on top of it. Now we can item slide into the wall, clipping through it, and item slide once again when we're at the bottom to hit the loading zone. Guys, I shit you not, I couldn't get past step 2 of Trial Skip. Getting on the door frame was pretty easy, but going from the frame to the tusk was for some reason impossible. Well, I know the reason actually, and it's because item sliding on that fucking door frame is so hard. Item sliding is a lot easier when you have a wall adjacent to you that you can build speed on. The problem with this door frame is that there isn't any adjacent walls. It's just the wall behind you. So when you try to build up speed against the wall, Link will start moving slowly in one direction. To account for this, you have to move the joystick in the opposite direction so you don't fall off the door frame. But since you're moving so fast, literally the slightest movement of the joystick will send you flying off in a random direction. While you're doing this, you also have to be aiming at the right spot on the tusk and perform a jump slash to actually get there. Believe it or not, I never even came close to getting on that tusk. This is probably the best I got. After hours of attempts, mind you. And at this point, the frustration was really starting to build. I had just gone through the traumatic experience that was barrier skip, and then when I thought I was all done and could just walk in and grab the light arrows, I was surprised by this bullshit. I was ready to just fucking pack it in and use the Battle of the Gales to get the fire and ice arrows the normal way. But there was still one more thing I wanted to try. This trick is also called Trial Skip, but it's a little different, and it's generally considered to be the harder of the two versions. To do this version of Trial Skip, you need to first item slide on that same doorframe again, and then perform what's called a ledge clip, which is done by first hanging off the ledge of the doorframe, then pulling yourself up, placing a bomb behind you with B, doing a backflip over the bomb, pulling the Deku Leaf out to glide back to the ledge, then immediately push the joystick to the right so Link moves into the bomb, which will then push him out of bounds. At that point, you can use the Deku Leaf to glide out of bounds until you hit the loading zone for the next room. It doesn't seem that bad, right? Wrong. It's bad. It's very bad. Since I tried the previous skip so many times, I got really good at item sliding to the door frame. But doing the ledge clip was so frustrating. It was so many inputs in such a short amount of time. Even if you do them all correctly, you only have a 3-frame window to press right so that Link goes into the bomb and clips out of bounds. So I would do all the steps correctly, and most of the time it just wouldn't work. or the rare chance that it did, I would be so surprised that I would forget to use a Deku Leaf and just void out. Or I would pull it out way too late and just not have the height to make it to the loading zone. I tried this over and over and over again, and I just couldn't get it. This broke me. I tried to stay positive. I tried to keep going, but I just couldn't. I couldn't do this. I play Pikmin, I don't play Zelda. Why would I even think that I could? I don't have the skills to pull this off. I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. Why did I think I could do this challenge? Why did I think I could make this video? Why did I think I could become a YouTuber? Because I can't. I'm not good enough. So, here's the thing. When that little voice inside your head starts telling you stuff like this, don't listen to it because it's not true. I know it's hard, and I know it feels like it is at the time, but it's not. It's your brain trying to take the easy way out. Because failing is easy. But do you want to know what's not easy? Getting back up and trying again. So next time the little voice inside your head tells you that you can't do it, that you don't have the skill, that you're not good enough, gather all those thoughts inside your head, put them in a neat little pile, and politely tell them to fuck off. After hours of trying, I was finally able to pull off Trial Skill, completely bypassing every boss in the boss rush, allowing me to defeat Shadow Ganon, grab the light arrows, and unlock the fire and ice arrows, which will now allow us to finish the rest of the game. Oh, and we also did two very important things while we were here. The first was to unlock this portal that connects the Forbidden Fortress with Ganon's Tower, allowing us to come back here without having to collect any Triforce pieces. The second was to enter the Puppet Ganon fight. The second we enter this fight, the game just assumes that to get here we must have unlocked the Mirror Shield and fully upgraded Master Sword, so it just gives it to us. Which isn't a huge deal, mind you, but it'll make getting through the Earth Temple a lot quicker. So, as soon as the intro cutscene ends for the Puppet Ganon fight, I save and quit, which takes me back to the beginning of Ganon's Tower. At that point, I can take the portal and be transported back to the Forbidden Fortress. So, you're probably thinking, hey, you were at the end of the game. Why did you not just kill Ganon and finish off the challenge? Well, we technically could have, but actually getting to Ganon requires the use of the hook shot. And if you don't have the hook shot, it requires the use of a trick called zombie hovering, which is probably the second hardest trick in the game, and a trick I had no interest in trying. Besides, I think it's more interesting for the challenge if I do both dungeons anyways, so it's the route I decided to go with. But yeah, once we leave the portal, we're back at the Forbidden Fortress. And now we have to go back to the Tower of the Gods to hit a certain text trigger. If we don't do this, Medley and Makar will not show up in the overworld, and we need both of them to complete the Earth and Wind Temple. Remember, before we did all this bullshit, we had just beaten the Forsaken Fortress for a second time, and we were supposed to be in Hyrule watching the cutscene where Tetra is revealed to be Zelda, not skipping barriers and trials for 17 hours trying to get the light arrows. So this text prompt is basically reverting us to a state where we had just beaten the Forsaken Fortress and had not just seen the Puppet Ganon fight. Now with that out of the way, we can finally make use of these stupid fire and ice arrows that we worked so hard to get. I sailed to Ice Ring Isle and Fire Mountain, used the fire and ice arrows, and grabbed us the iron boots and power bracelets. Next, I went to Headstone Isle and learned the Earth God's lyric, which meant I could now go to Dragon Roost Island, play the song for Melody so that she would now come with me to the Earth Temple. And yes, I cruised the entire time. And yes, it took forever. So, the Earth Temple basically has 0 wind. So, I'm gonna be skipping over most of it. The only interesting thing really is that since we got the Mirror Shield early, we could basically skip the first half of the dungeon. You're normally supposed to go through all these side rooms to unlock the Mirror Shield, and then come back to this main room and shine a light on the statue. But we could just do that right off the bat. Oh, and the final boss was super easy because we could just shoot him with light arrows instead of having to use the Mirror Shield. Yeah, having light arrows at this point in the game is super broken. They basically one-shot everything. So, after we defeat the boss, something interesting happens. Our fully upgraded Master Sword actually loses power and becomes half upgraded. Which is actually what is supposed to happen when you beat the Earth Temple, but since we already technically made it to Ganon, our sword actually receives a downgrade here. So now that the Earth Temple is finished, we can head to Gale Isle, use the Iron Boots, learn the Wind God's aria, and play the song for Makar so they can follow us to the Wind Temple. I'll be honest, the Wind Temple made me nervous. We are doing a no-wind challenge, and the place we are going is called the fucking Wind Temple. That does not seem good. I don't remember a lot about this temple, but I do remember there being a big-ass fan in the middle of it. And I don't know how we're gonna get past that, but whatever, let's jump in. So, the very first room of the temple has wind in it, but we can just use Makar to fly under the wind and hit the switch, allowing us to use the Deku Leaf to fly to the other side. Now, some of you may consider using Makar's helicopter leaf thing as using the wind, but I would disagree. I look at it in the same way I looked at the Deku Leaf. As long as we're not taking advantage of any kind of external wind, we're fine to fly around. So the next room has a panel that rotates when you spin this wind turbine with the Deku Leaf, which we obviously can't do, but luckily for us, we can use Makar to fly over the panel and hit the switch on the other side, which causes it to rotate. In the next room, we plant some trees with Makar, and he gets taken hostage and put in this jail cell. What we're supposed to do now is make our way through the dungeon without him and find the hookshot and then free him from his prison. But the problem is, the very next room has another one of these stupid panel things. And this time, we don't have Makar to bail us out. To make things worse, this is the only room we have access to. There is nowhere else to go. So, we're gonna have to find a way past this panel. Yeah, there's no way past this panel. I tried throwing myself at it again and again with item slides, and nothing happened. So, what are we gonna do? Well, in the main room that Makar is trapped in, there happens to be a warp pot. You normally have to get through the room we were stuck in to actually reach it and unlock it, but if we shoot a well-aimed fire arrow, we can burn the wood on the top of the pot, unlocking it for use. We can now take the pot in the first room of the dungeon and warp to this new one, skipping the room we were previously stuck in. This now allows us to hit the switch and unlock the lower floors of the Wind Temple, which is actually where the hookshot is located. The problem is though, it's behind a locked door, and we have no small keys and no way to access any. But thankfully, we don't need any small keys to enter this door. We can use something called a roll clip, which is very similar to a ledge clip, but it's a hell of a lot easier. The first thing we have to do is float down and land on the frame of the door. Then we need to hang off the frame just like we did with the ledge clip, but instead of pulling out a bomb this time, we just need to aim our joystick at the wall and press the roll button on the very first frame that Link is able to move. Which is a frame perfect trick, but we can basically try it as much as we want as long as we don't fall down. If we perform it right though, it'll clip us out of bounds. At that point, we can use the Deku Leaf to fly into the loading zone and enter the mini boss fight. Beating the mini boss himself is actually super easy because we can just one-shot him with the light arrows. Once we beat him though, we can finally get the hookshot, which means we can finally get our boy Makar back. After that, we head back into the main room, and then went through the door on the opposite side and nabbed us a small key. Which is actually the key that's meant for the mini-boss room that we just entered, but we have to save it for a different door, which is why we performed the roll clip in the first place. Now all we have to do is hookshot back up to the main room so we can go and save Makar. And I don't know if there's something wrong with me, but I just couldn't find where I was supposed to hookshot to, so I ended up saving and quitting to warp myself back to the start of the dungeon, and this proved to be a massive mistake. Remember when I said our sword got reverted to half power when we completed the Earth Temple? Well, when I saved and quit, for some reason, the Master Sword went back to full power. And that's a problem, because when the Master Sword's at full power, the game doesn't think we should be in the Wind Temple. The game thinks we're finished it. So, when I went to save Makar, he just wasn't there. I opened up the jail cell and it was completely empty. At that point, I had no idea where he had gone. It had me feeling like Ashton Kutcher because I was like, dude, where's Makar? Oh, I'm sorry. We are so fucked. Now, do we not only have to beat the Wind Temple without the wind, we have to do it without Makar as well. We are so fucked. So, once you save Makar, you're supposed to go through the room we were stuck in earlier, rotate the panel, then play the Wind God's aria with Makar to break this Sandstone. Once that's done, you can enter the room, defeat these 3 knights, and grab yourself the boss key. But we still can't get past that room, and now that we don't have Makar, we can't even break the Songstone, but we still can get past it. If we take the warp pot again to that upper area, we can actually enter the door behind it, which loops back to the room we were stuck in, but just on the other side of that panel. It's basically like we're entering the room backwards. But now we still have to get past the Sandstone without Makar, which we can do with another roll clip on this door here. We just need to item slide backwards into the Sandstone, jump slash off the steps, which will then shoot us right up at the door frame. Then we just have to pull off another roll clip, float over behind the Sandstone, and land on this little area behind it and open the door behind the stone. Now we can quickly kill the 3 knights with our light arrows and grab ourselves the boss key. After doing that, the game wants you to do all this shit with the big fan in the main room to open up the lowest level of the dungeon. But we're not going to do any of that because we can't do anything with that fan and we don't have Makar. So instead, we're going to perform an out of bounds clip with the hook shot. If we come to this platform here in the main room, set ourselves in this corner, turn around, then aim at this very specific spot on the target, it'll confuse the game, and when we use the hook shot, it'll clip Link right through the wall. At that point, we can just use the leaf to glide down, which skips having to open up the floor at all. Now, we have to use the small key that we saved by doing the roll clip earlier and continue on. 2 rooms after, we come across this room where we're supposed to use Makar to grow a tree, which allows us to hookshot across. But we don't have to do any of that. We can just use an item slide to skip all of it. Now we've come to the final room, right before the boss door. In this room, we're supposed to make safe passage for Makar, then bring him across with the iron boots. Then you play the Wind God's aria again and break the Sandstone that leads to the final boss. But guess what? We can just item slide again. We can use an item slot to get through all the wind, and then once we reach the Sandstone, we can actually just sidle behind it. If we sidle against the wall and walk towards the Sunstone, the game will just allow us to walk right behind it. If we walk far enough, we can just make it to the next room without having to move the Sandstone at all, making it maybe one of the easiest tricks in the entire game. But yeah, that's it. We made it to the boss without Makar or having to use the wind at all. And something really funny actually happens when you beat the boss. Since Makar is not where he's supposed to be, the game just gets all confused and starts playing his music as the boss dies. which is honestly just fabulous. But yeah, guys, that's basically the challenge. Our Master Sword is completely powered up. We can just go ahead and fight Ganon now. The game wants us to collect the Triforce pieces so that we can break the barrier leading to Ganon's Tower, but we've already been to Ganon's Tower and unlocked the shortcut there, so all we have to do now is head back to the Forsaken Fortress, take the portal back, use our newly obtained hookshot to make it to the final room, and then kill Ganon. That's it. Challenge over. The Wind Waker has been conquered without the wind. We didn't need it for Melody. We didn't need it for the Forbidden Woods. We didn't need it for the fire and ice arrows. We didn't even need it for the goddamn Wind Temple. This challenge has been utterly conquered. We have left behind our title as the Wind Waker and have ascended to who we were always meant to be, the Waker. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was quite the journey. We got to some pretty dark places in the middle there, but that's okay. These challenges are probably taking a toll on my mental health, but I'll have to face that someday. But that day is not today. Oh, and I should mention, if you want to support the channel, check out our Patreon. You can get your name shouted out at the end of our videos, and it helps us keep making more videos like this. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, and before we do the whole Patreon thing, I just want to give a huge shout out to the guys on the Wind Waker HD speedrunning Discord. They were so helpful in this run, would not have been possible without it. These 4 guys in particular really helped me out. Thank you so much. I appreciate the hell out of you. This video was made possible through the support of our amazing patrons. I want to give a special shout out to Rebecca Lyons, Lay Burb, Puddles Megan, and Koi Koi 13.